For 15 years, the transfers were silent. $12,000 every Christmas like clockwork. Then, from a hospital bed, I made one modest request, $500, and my son said no. That no is why I printed 15 years of bank records and laid them out for the entire family to see. I am that father. For over a decade, I operated on a simple, silent belief. Support your children, ask for nothing in return. But a health crisis has a way of rewriting every unspoken rule. This is the story of what happens when the ledger you never meant to open becomes the only evidence left to prove you were ever there at all. My name is Robert. I am 68 years old. I worked for 42 years as a foreman at the same manufacturing plant, a job that paid the bills, built a modest pension, and taught me the value of a silent promise. The first transfer was in 2008. My son, Michael, was 24. He had just moved to the city for a new job that paid in ambition more than salary. His first apartment was a studio that cost more than my mortgage. I remember the phone call, his voice thin with a stress I recognized. It was the sound of a man trying to keep his head above water while pretending he was swimming. I told him not to worry about Christmas that year. I said I'd send a little something to help with the holiday. I wired $3,000. The relief in his voice was immediate, palpable. It felt better than any gift I could have unwrapped. That was the seed. The next year I did it again, and the year after that. It became our ritual, not a spoken agreement, but a rhythm. By the third Christmas, the amount had quietly doubled. $6,000. He had met Sarah by then. The gifts became for them, for their life together. I never discussed the mechanics with my wife, Elena. She knew, of course. We shared a bank account, but we shared a philosophy too. You help when you can, you don't keep score. You certainly don't hang a price tag on the air your child breathes. Elena passed away 7 years ago. After she was gone, the ritual became my anchor. The one day a year I felt certain I was still a father in a tangible way. The amount grew again, $12,000, every December 24th. Like a tax, I was privileged to pay. For them, it was the foundation of their comfort. It paid down credit cards, covered vacations to Mexico, upgraded their kitchen. For me, it was the slow, deliberate redirecting of a lifetime's accumulation. I sold the old fishing boat. I let the subscription to the newspaper lapse. I drove my 10-year-old sedan 3 years past when I should have traded it in. Every choice was quiet, invisible. The math, however, is brutally simple. $12,000 a year for 15 years is $180,000. I know the number, I just never added it up. Michael and Sarah's life flourished. He got promotions. She started a small business. They bought a house in a neighborhood with good schools. I visited, of course. I saw the new furniture, the expensive espresso machine, the landscaped backyard. They thanked me always. "You're too generous, Dad. We don't know what we'd do without you." The words were warm. I let them be enough. I assumed the sentiment behind them was a fortress. My life, by contrast, remained small. The old house, the same routines. To them, I was just Dad, comfortable in his ways, careful with his money, happily settled in his simplicity. They never saw the spreadsheets I kept in a drawer, the ones where I tracked my pension distributions against my rising medical costs. They never saw the quiet panic of a fixed income meeting inflation. Why would I show them? My role was to be the rock, not the ripple. The first crack appeared 2 years ago. It was small. Sarah mentioned in passing how stressful property taxes were. Michael joked that maybe Dad's Christmas bonus could be a January tax relief fund instead. They both laughed. I didn't. The joke landed with the weight of an expectation. The ritual was no longer a gift. It was a line item in their financial planning. I sent the $12,000 at Christmas as always, but for the first time, the act felt cold, transactional. Then this past fall, my heart decided to rewrite the rules. A myocardial infarction. The doctors called it a moderate heart attack. There's nothing moderate about the feeling of your own heart stuttering in your chest. The ambulance, the lights, the frantic beep of machines in the emergency room. The new reality of pill organizers and dietary restrictions and a profound, exhausting fragility. The medical bills began arriving before I was fully home. The insurance covered most, but the gaps were cavernous. Copays for specialists, charges for medications that sounded like science fiction, a home nurse for the first week. The total out-of-pocket crept toward $5,000. I managed it, draining what was left of my emergency fund, selling a few old stocks my father had left me. It was tight, but I was coping. Until the furnace died. In December, a final violent cough of metal and then silence as the temperature outside plummeted. The repair estimate was $1,200. I looked at my bank account. I had $700. The pension check wasn't due for 10 days. I sat in my cold living room, wrapped in a blanket, and I realized I had a choice. I could dip into the small, sacred fund I kept for my own funeral expenses, a final act of not being a burden, or I could break the one rule Alina and I had never written down. I could ask. My hand shook when I dialed. It was a Wednesday evening. Michael answered, the sound of a television comedy in the background. We made small talk about the weather, his kids. My throat was tight. Finally, I said it. Michael, I'm in a bit of a bind. The furnace gave out. I was wondering, could I borrow $500 just until my pension comes in? I can pay you back next week. The silence on the line was different from the silence of relief I'd heard 15 years before. This was a hollow, processing silence. I heard him cover the phone, a muffled conversation with Sarah. His voice came back, strained, apologetic in a way that felt rehearsed. Dad, I'm so sorry. It's just a really bad time for us. Sarah's business had a slow quarter. We're looking at our own property tax bill. I don't think we can swing it right now. He offered alternatives. A space heater he could bring over. Maybe I could ask my brother. He was so sorry. I listened. I said I understood. I told him not to worry about it. We hung up. I sat in the deepening cold for a long time. The number echoed in the empty room. $500, 180,000 given, 500 asked for, and denied. That was the moment the ledger opened itself, not with anger at first, with a cold clarity, a forensic kind of calm. I walked to my home office, the one they thought I used for crossword puzzles. I logged into my online banking. I went back year by year to 2008, and I began to print. The printer word to life, spitting out a history I had felt but never seen. Page after page, in the stark black and white of bank ledger font, was the story of my silence. I laid them out on my dining room table, a table Alina had picked out, where we'd shared thousands of meals, 15 Christmases, 15 lines that read transfer to Michael and Sarah Dawson. The amount started at $3,000, then $6,000, then, for the last 11 years, a steady, unbroken column of $12,000 entries. I got a ruler, a notepad, and a pen. I began to annotate. Next to the 2009 entry, I wrote, apartment security deposit. Next to 2011, helped with wedding down payment. 2013, Sarah's car transmission. 2015, baby Ella's medical bills. 2017, family vacation to Disney. 2019, home renovation loan. The list grew. I was not just giving a gift. I was underwriting a life. Each notation was a memory of a phone call, a story of a crisis narrowly averted, a moment of gratitude that now felt like a transaction waiting to be settled. The cold in the house seeped into my bones, but I was burning with a new, focused energy. I didn't stop at the transfers. I pulled my own bank statements from the same years. I wanted to see the other side of the equation, the side of sacrifice. There, in the same font, was a different story. 2010, cancelled fishing trip with brothers. 2012, postponed new roof. 2014, sold Alina's jewelry, agreed. 2016, dental work delayed. 2018, car repair on credit card. 2020, reduced medication dosage to stretch prescription. I had created a perfect, invisible transfer of wealth, from my security to their comfort, from my future to their present, and I had done it with a smile, calling it a gift so they would never feel the weight of a debt. But a debt existed, not a financial one but a moral one, the debt of recognition, the debt of asterisk seeing the sacrifice, and in that cold room with the evidence laid bare, I understood they had never seen it at all. To them, it was just Dad's Christmas bonus. A reliable feature of their landscape, like a mountain. They never wondered what the mountain had to give up to stand there. 3 days passed, the furnace was still broken. I used space heaters and slept in multiple layers. Michael called once to check on me, to ask if the space heater he'd offered to bring was still needed. His voice was normal, cheerful even. The $500 request might as well have never happened. That normalcy was the final, devastating proof. The refusal was not a painful anomaly for him, it was a simple budget decision. I was a line item, and the line item was Denny'd. That's when I made the decision. The reckoning would not be private. A quiet conversation would change nothing. It would be swallowed by excuses, by defensiveness, by the same emotional accounting that had allowed this to happen. The evidence was not for me, and it was not just for Michael. It was for the entire family ecosystem that had grown around this one-way river of money. I called my daughter, Christine. She is 3 years younger than Michael, lives 2 states away. Our relationship has always been simpler, less financially entangled. She chose a teaching career, married a teacher. They have never asked for anything. I sent them $500 every Christmas, a token they always thanked me for profusely. The disparity shamed me as I dialed. "Dad, is everything okay?" Her voice was immediately concerned. News of my heart attack had traveled, of course. "I need your help with something, Christine. It's important. Can you and David come here this weekend? And can you invite Michael and Sarah? Tell them it's a family meeting about my health and the estate. It's not entirely untrue." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, that sounds serious. Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm sure," I said, "and I need you to trust me. Please don't warn Michael about the topic. Just get them here." The doubt in her silence was palpable, but her loyalty won. "Okay, Dad, we'll be there." The next 48 hours were a blur of meticulous preparation. I didn't just make copies of the bank statements. I created a presentation. It sounds cold, but this was a boardroom negotiation now. The subject was 15 years of familial equity. I bought a large trifold presentation board from the office supply store. On the left panel, I glued the printed records of the transfers to Michael and Sarah, each one highlighted in yellow, with my handwritten notations in clear black ink. In the center panel, I created a simple graph. The y-axis was dollars, the x-axis was years, 2 lines. One, a steep climbing staircase representing the total cumulative money sent to Michael, $180,000. The other, a flat red line at the $500 mark with a single sharp drop to zero where my request had been Denny'd. On the right panel, I placed my own corresponding bank statements, with my sacrifices highlighted in blue: sold jewelry, roof postponed, dental work delayed. At the very bottom of the board, in the largest font I could manage, I wrote the question that was burning through me: what is the price of a father? The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the dark living room, looking at the presentation board leaning against the wall. It looked absurd, melodramatic, the act of a bitter old man. Maybe I was, but beneath the bitterness was a raw, howling need for someone, anyone, to witness the landscape of my giving, to see the empty fields on my side of the fence. Saturday arrived. Christine and her husband David came first. They brought soup. Christine took one look at my face, at the rigid way I was holding myself, and hugged me without a word. She saw the presentation board but didn't ask. Her intuition was screaming. Michael and Sarah arrived 20 minutes later. They brought the kids, Ella and Josh. This was a problem. I hadn't considered the children. Sarah was all cheerful efficiency. "Dad, we thought the kids could watch a movie in the other room. We brought the iPad." She was ushering them away before I could speak, already treating my house as a logistical problem to be solved. Michael hung back, looking at me, then at Christine, then at the unfamiliar presentation board covered in a sheet. "What's all this, Dad?" Christine said it was about your estate planning. He tried to sound light, but there was a wary edge. "It is," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Please sit down." We sat at the dining table, the same table where the evidence had been compiled. The 5 of us, Michael, Sarah, Christine, David, and me. The sheet over the board stood in the corner like a ghost. I began. I did not talk about the furnace. I did not talk about my heart. I talked about history. "For 15 years, I started, this family has operated on a certain set of assumptions about generosity, about need, about what is owed and what is gift. I have come to realize that my assumptions and yours have not been the same. Before we talk about the future, about my estate, we need a clear understanding of the past." I stood up. I walked to the board. My hand did not shake as I gripped the sheet. "This," I said, "is the past." I pulled the sheet away. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute silence. It was the silence of a plane losing cabin pressure. Michael's eyes scanned the left panel, the yellow highlights, the familiar dates and amounts. His face went pale, then flushed. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, not in shock, but in what looked like sheer, tactical horror. She saw the graph immediately. She understood the story it told before Michael did. Christine gasped, "Oh, Dad." Her voice was a whisper of pain. She was looking at the right panel, at the blue highlights of my sacrifices. She saw it all. David put a hand on her shoulder, his own face a mask of stunned comprehension. Michael finally found his voice. It was a strangled, defensive bark. "What is this? Why would you air all this out like this? This is private." "It stopped being private," I said quietly, "when the pattern became a prison. Look at the graph, Michael." He looked, he saw the soaring line of giving, the flat line of need, the plunge to zero. His jaw worked. "This is about the $500. Are you serious? We said it was a bad time. This is manipulation." Sarah found her voice, cool and damage control smooth. "Robert, we are so grateful for everything you've done, you know that, but presenting it like this, it makes it seem like we owe you. They were gifts. You always said they were gifts." And there it was, the crux of the whole rotten tragedy, the linguistic trap I had built myself. "They were gifts," I agreed, and I saw a flicker of triumph in her eyes. I continued, "But a gift in a family exists in a context. It is given in love and received in gratitude. It builds a bridge. When I stood on my side of that bridge, freezing and sick, and asked to walk across it just once, for the smallest of things, you closed the gate. You told me the bridge was only for traffic going one way. So yes, I am showing you the traffic, all of it." I pointed to the right panel, to the blue highlights. "These were my gifts to you too, the trips not taken, the repairs not made, the security I relinquished. I gave them willingly, but I gave them assuming the bridge was there. The $500 refusal proved it was just a shoot." Christine spoke, tears in her eyes. "Michael, you said no to Dad for $500. The disbelief in her voice was a heavier indictment than any graph. Michael was crumbling under the dual fronts of my evidence and his sister's judgment. "You don't understand our financial pressure, Sarah's business, the kids' schools. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," Christine shot back, a lifetime of quieter resentment bubbling over. "You live in a 4-bedroom house, you go to Europe. Dad lives in a cold house with a broken furnace and you told him no." She turned to Sarah, her voice trembling. "And you let him." The meeting disintegrated. What I had intended as a stark, clinical revelation became a raw, familial eruption. Sarah accused Christine of being jealous. Michael shouted that I was shamming them to make myself a martyr. David tried to be a peacemaker and was shouted down. Through the chaos, I stood by my board, silent. I had wanted them to see the numbers. Now they were feeling them. The emotional total was finally being calculated in real time. In the midst of the yelling, little Ella, who had slipped away from the iPad, appeared in the doorway. She was 8 years old. She looked at the angry faces of her parents, her tearful aunt, her silent grandfather standing next to a big board full of numbers. Her face contorted in confusion and fear. "Daddy," she said, "why is everyone mad at Grandpa?" That question, in that tiny, scared voice, froze the room. It was the pivot. The moment the conflict shifted from a financial reckoning to a moral one witnessed by the next generation. Sarah rushed to her daughter, pulling her away, shooting me a look of pure, unvarnished hatred. In that look, I saw the truth. She didn't hate me for exposing their greed. She hated me for exposing it in front of her child, for making her see herself through her daughter's eyes. Michael looked from his daughter's retreating back to my board to my face. The anger drained from him, replaced by a dawning, horrifying shame. He wasn't seeing the numbers anymore. He was seeing the story they told. He was seeing the father who sold his wife's jewelry while funding a Disney vacation. He was seeing the line that dropped to zero. "Oh God," he whispered, not to anyone in the room. He turned and walked out the front door into the cold afternoon without his coat. The door slammed shut. The reckoning had begun, but I had underestimated the fallout. I had opened the ledger, but I had no control over the currency of ruin that would now flood out. Sarah was still in the house, and her silence was more dangerous than Michael's anger. Sarah did not follow her husband into the cold. She stayed in my living room, and the look she gave me wasn't one of defeat. It was a recalibration. She smoothed her sweater, a gesture of pure composure. "Well," she said, her voice chillingly even, "you've certainly made your point, Robert. I hope it was worth it." Christine stepped forward. "Sarah, just don't." Sarah ignored her. She looked at the presentation board, then back at me. "You've catalogued every penny you ever gave us, framed it as a sacrifice, but you never asked what we did with it. You never asked what it cost us to receive it." This was a new front, a pivot from defense to offense. "Cost you?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "The weight of your expectation," she said, a crack finally appearing in her calm. "The unspoken pressure of your generosity. Every gift was a leash, Robert. A reminder that our success, our comfort was never fully ours. It was yours on loan. You think Michael doesn't feel that? You think he hasn't spent 15 years trying to measure up to the silent standard of a man who gives everything and asks for nothing? It's an impossible standard. So when you finally asked, yes, it was a shock. The system broke because the one rule was that you never asked." Her words landed like stones. They contained a terrible, twisted truth. I had built a dynamic where my need was not supposed to exist. My need was the flaw in the architecture. By asking, I had broken the contract I had written. Christine shook her head. "That's a cop-out, Sarah. That's you reframing selfishness as some kind of psychological burden. Dad needed help. You said no. The reason doesn't magically make you the victim." Sarah turned her gaze to Christine. "And you, the grateful daughter, the one who took the $500 gifts and never asked for more, do you feel superior? You should. You played the game perfectly. You get to be the hero now while we're the villains." She gathered her purse and her children's things. "This isn't over. You've shown your evidence, but you don't get to control the verdict." She left, pulling a confused Ella and Josh behind her. The house felt hollow again, but now charged with a different, more poisonous energy. David spoke for the first time in a while. "Robert, she's going to spin this. She's already spinning it." I knew he was right. The private reckoning was about to go public. The first salvo came that evening via text message to Christine. It was from Michael, but it had Sarah's phrasing all over it. It read, "Tell Dad we need space. His manipulative stunt has caused profound damage. We will be seeking family counseling to process this, and until then, we need a boundary. Do not contact the kids." Manipulative stunt, boundary, the language of therapy weaponized. Sarah was reframing the ledger not as a revelation of their taking, but as an emotional attack by me. She was establishing the narrative. I was the unstable, vindictive parent, and they were the victims setting healthy limits. Christine showed me the text, her face ashen. "She's cutting you off from the grandchildren, Dad. That's her move." The cold in my house was now metaphysical. I had wanted them to see the cost. The cost, it turned out, was going to be my relationship with my son and his children. But then 2 days later, the second, more shocking salvo arrived. It came in my email, a formal letter from a law firm, Bennett and Shaw. It was addressed to me. The subject line, "Formal inquiry regarding financial transactions and undue influence." My hands went numb. I opened it. The letter was a masterpiece of legal insinuation. It stated that, following a distressing family meeting, their clients, Michael and Sarah Dawson, had concerns about the nature and intent of substantial financial transfers made to them over the years. It suggested that these transfers, given my advanced age and recent health crisis, might have been made under circumstances that could be reviewed for undue influence or lack of capacity. It requested I preserve all documents related to my finances and the transfers. It was not a lawsuit, it was a threat, a shot across the bow. Sarah hadn't just spun a narrative, she had lawyered up. She was using my own evidence, the meticulously documented transfers, as the foundation for a potential legal argument that I was the problem, that the money I gave might be evidence of my own instability, or worse, a future claim that I was incompetent and they were protecting themselves. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me breathless. I had shown them the river of money. Their response was to question the sanity of the river's source. I called Howard, my attorney and old friend. I read him the letter. He was silent for a long moment. "Robert," he said finally, his voice grave, "this is a preemptive strike. They're creating a paper trail. If you ever try to adjust your will, or if there's a dispute about your care later, this letter establishes their concern about your judgment. It's a defensive move disguised as an offensive one. They're scared you'll cut them off, so they're laying groundwork to challenge your capacity if you do. They think I'm going to disinherit them over $500. I asked, the absurdity choking me. "No," Howard said softly, "they think you've already done it in your heart. The presentation board proved that to them. This is the consequence. You showed them the score. Now they're playing a different game entirely." He advised me not to respond to the letter, to send all future communication through him, to continue preserving all my records. The father-son conflict had just been escalated into a legal Cold War. The isolation that followed was absolute. Michael did not call. Christine checked on me daily, a lifeline of fury and sorrow. She and David offered to loan me the money for the furnace, an offer I accepted with a humiliation that burned. The repairman came and fixed it. The house grew warm again, but I felt permanently cold. A week after the lawyer letter, my doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a fondness for gossip. She held a bakery box. "I made too many brownies, Robert," she said, but her eyes were full of pity. "I just wanted to see how you were holding up." I thanked her and took the box. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. "You know, Sarah was at the community pool party last weekend. She was talking to a group of the young mothers." Mrs. Gable looked uncomfortable. "She said you were having a very hard time since your heart attack, that you were lashing out at the family, making up stories about money. She said they were all so worried about your mental state." There it was, the narrative had leaked. It was now community gossip. The quiet, generous Robert was now the unstable, bitter old man inventing grievances. Sarah was protecting her social standing, inoculating their friend group against my side of the story before it could even be told. I felt the walls of my world, already cracked, begin to crumble. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a campaign for control of the truth. Then the third revelation hit. It came from Christine, who had done some digging of her own. She came over, her laptop under her arm, her expression grim. "Dad, I need to show you something. I've been going over the notes you made on the bank statements. The one for 2017, you wrote family vacation to Disney. Remember?" I nodded. I remembered the photos they'd sent, the kids with Mickey Mouse, all smiles. Christine opened her laptop. I was curious, so I looked up what Sarah's business was doing that year. She started that Interior Design LLC, curated space, in 2016. She pulled up a state business registry website. Look at the annual report filing for 2017. It shows a $25,000 owner's draw, a big one, right in November. She looked at me. "Disney was in March, Dad. Your $12,000 was sent in December. I don't think your money went to Disney. I think it went into Sarah's business. I think it covered that owner's draw. I think they used your Christmas gift to pay her a salary and then used their own money to go to Disney." Floor seemed to tilt. The specific notations I'd made, the stories I'd attached to the money, they were wrong. I had been narrating their life through the lens they provided. The money was for the vacation. The money was for the car. But it was all just cash flow to them. My sentimental ledger was a fiction. The reality was colder, more transactional. The money went into a pool, and from that pool they funded their lifestyle and her business. My gifts weren't solving crises, they were subsidizing ambition. "There's more," Christine said, her voice tight. "I did a property search on their house. They did a cash-out refinance last year. They pulled out $80,000 in equity. Their mortgage payment went up by $400 a month." She let that hang in the air. "You asked for $500. They said no because of cash flow. But 4 months earlier, they took $80,000 out of their house." The pieces snapped together with a final, sickening click. It wasn't about a bad quarter. It wasn't about property taxes. It was about priority. My need was not a priority. The furnace repair was not a line item. The $80,000, that was for something else. A business expansion, investments, I didn't know. but it was more important than my warmth, my safety. The betrayal was no longer emotional, it was financial, and it was deliberate. They had liquidity, they just chose not to direct any of it to me. I thought the presentation board was the full truth. It was only the first layer. Beneath it was a layer of manipulation, of narrative control, of legal maneuvering. And beneath that, the bedrock truth. My money was fuel for their engine, and when the engine was running fine, they saw no reason to spare a gallon for the man who had provided the fuel for 15 years. That night I sat at Alina's table. I looked at the lawyer's letter. I thought of Mrs. Gable's pitying eyes. I thought of the cash-out refinance. The mountain of evidence had grown, but it had only made the summit more distant, more shrouded in bitterness. I had wanted a reckoning, I had gotten a war, and I was losing. I was the old man in the cold house, while they controlled the story, the law, and the grandchildren. But then I remembered the one thing they did not control, the one piece of evidence I hadn't yet used, not the records of what I gave, the record of what I still held, my will, my estate, the final ledger entry that had not yet been written. Sarah was playing a game of legal and social strategy. She thought the battlefield was my reputation and my mental capacity. She had forgotten that I was the one who built the fortune she was so keen to manage, and I knew how to protect what I built. I called Howard the next morning. I didn't want to talk about defense. I wanted to talk about legacy. Howard, I said, the will, the one from after Alina died, it leaves everything to Michael and Christine split evenly, correct? That's correct, Robert. With the standard spousal protections, of course. Sarah would have rights to their marital share of Michael's inheritance. Tear it up, I said. There was no heat in my voice, just the cold certainty of a final calculation. I want a new one, and I want a series of irrevocable trusts. Howard was quiet for a beat. Robert, before we do anything reactive, let's think this through. They've lawyered up. A drastic change now could be used as evidence of the very instability they're alleging. It's not reactive, I said. It's protective, and it's not drastic, it's logical. Hear me out. I laid out my plan. It wasn't about punishment, it was about stewardship. The core of my estate, the house, the investments, the remaining savings, it would not go to Michael directly. It would go into a charitable remainder trust. Upon my death, the trust would provide a lifetime annuity to Christine. After her lifetime, the entire remaining corpus would go to a charity that funded heart disease research in Alina's name. Michael was named as a successor beneficiary only if Christine predeceased him, and even then, his share would be held in a lifetime trust he could not alienate or borrow against. For Michael, I created a separate, smaller trust. Its funding was exactly $180,000. The principal was locked. He would receive only the interest, paid quarterly, a symbolic, perpetual annuity equal to the annualized value of what I had given him, $12,000 a year for the rest of his life. The trust document included a letter of explanation. It read, "This trust represents the capital of my past generosity. You will receive its yield as you have for 15 years. The principal, like the sacrifices that created it, will remain intact beyond anyone's reach." For my grandchildren, Ella and Josh, I created education trusts. They would have their college and graduate school fully funded, but the trustee was not Michael or Sarah. It was Christine, with David as successor. The funds were untouchable for any other purpose. Finally, I left Sarah $1, a nominal bequest that, in legal terms, would prevent her from claiming she was accidentally omitted from the will and contesting it. Howard listened, then let out a low whistle. It's elegant, and it's brutal. The charitable trust is bulletproof. It completely removes the main asset pool from their reach while providing for Christine. The annuity trust for Michael is a message in financial form. He'll understand it. That's the point, I said. I'm not disinheriting him. I'm translating our relationship into the language he and Sarah seem to understand best, the language of finance. He gets the cash flow, not the asset, just like before. The documents were drawn up and signed within the week. I had 2 independent physicians examine me and certify my mental soundness for the record, preempting any capacity challenge. Howard sent a formal letter to Bennett and Shaw, informing them of the updated estate plan, citing their own letter as the reason for ensuring absolute clarity and protection against future misunderstanding. It was a legal checkmate. I didn't tell Michael, I didn't tell Christine. The documents were filed and I waited. The silence lasted a month. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Michael, alone. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He was thinner. The confident veneer was gone. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I stepped aside. He walked to the living room but didn't sit. He stood facing the blank wall where the presentation board had been. "Sarah filed for separation," he said, not looking at me. The statement hung in the air. I hadn't expected that. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. He turned, his eyes red. "Don't be." It was the only thing she couldn't spin. After the lawyer letter, after she started the gossip, I started asking questions. Real questions about the business, about the refinance, about where all the money really went. He laughed, a hollow sound. "Turns out Curated Space has been curating losses for 3 years. The $80,000 from the refinance, gone, eaten by overhead and her salary. My salary was covering our life. Your money. Your money was covering her dream. And when I confronted her, she said I was weak, that I was letting you manipulate me, that we had to stay unified to protect our future." Our future was her sinking business. He sank onto the couch, putting his head in his hands. "She never saw you as family, Dad. She saw you as a resource, and she saw me as the manager of that resource. When you stopped being a predictable resource and became a problem, her calculation changed. The lawyer letter wasn't to protect us from you. It was to protect her from me having a change of heart, to create a legal wedge so I'd be forced to side with her to avoid looking complicit." The final, ugly piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Sarah's aggression wasn't just about the money. It was about control of Michael. By making the conflict legal, she made choosing me an act of financial and legal treason for him. "I've been such a fool," he whispered. "For 15 years, I took it all. I never looked at the cost to you. I let her frame it, manage it, spend it. I became a passenger in my own life. And when you needed me, I wasn't a son. I was a budget committee of one, and you didn't pass the vote." He looked up at me, raw shame on his face. The look on Ella's face that day, that's what I can't escape. She saw her daddy yelling at her grandpa. She saw her mommy look at you with hate. What did I teach her that day? What kind of man did I show her I was? There were no easy answers. The damage was in the room with us, a third presence. "What happens now?" I asked. "I've moved out, I'm in a rental. The separation agreement is being negotiated. It's going to be messy. The house, there's not much equity left after the refinance. My savings are depleted." He took a deep breath. "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I needed to say it. To you, I am so sorry, Dad, for the $500 for all of it." It was the apology I had wanted. Now that it was here, it felt like ashes. It couldn't rewind time. It couldn't rebuild the trust that had been incinerated. "I believe you," I said, "and I forgive you, but forgiveness isn't a reset button. Something is broken. We can't go back to the way it was." He nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I know I don't deserve to." I told him then about the new will, about the trusts. I didn't do it to hurt him further. I did it because there could be no more secrets. He listened, his face growing still. When I explained the $180,000 annuity trust, he actually flinched. You gave me the exact sum," he said, understanding dawning. "Locked away, I get the interest. Forever." "Yes." He was quiet for a long time. "It's fair," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "It's more than fair, it's what I earned." He stood up, wiping his face. "Thank you for telling me, and for still providing for the kids. That's everything." He walked to the door, he paused, his hand on the knob. Can I come by sometimes? Not for anything, just to see you." "Yes," I said, "you can." He left. The house was quiet again, but the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of waiting for a battle. It was the silence after the storm has passed, when you survey the damage and begin to clear the debris. Christine, when she learned about the new estate plan, was horrified at first. She didn't want to be the rewarded child. I explained it wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility. She was the steward. She understood reluctantly and promised to honor Alina's memory with the charitable gift. The final surprise came 6 months later. It arrived in a plain envelope forwarded by Howard. It was a copy of a settlement statement from Sarah's divorce attorney. She was accepting a lump sum buyout of her interest in the marital home and waiving any claim to spousal support. The amount was $75,000. The source of the funds was listed as a family gift. Michael had given her a large portion of his last remaining asset to be free of her, and he had funded it by taking a loan against the only capital he had left, the future interest payments from the annuity trust I had created for him. He had found a financial company that would advance him the lump sum based on the guaranteed future income. He had, in effect, monetized my message of perpetual limited provision to close the chapter on his marriage. He bought his freedom with the yield of my past generosity. The symbolism was so perfect it felt tragic. He was still trapped in the financial logic I had decried, but now he was using it to escape. Perhaps he had learned something after all. He came over the Sunday after the settlement was final. We sat in the kitchen. He didn't mention the loan. I didn't ask. We talked about the weather, about Christine's job, about Ella's soccer team. It was stilted, awkward, but it was a conversation. The bridge was gone, but we were both standing on our respective shores, waving across the water. The ledger is closed now. The $180,000 is a fossil preserved in the amber of a trust. The $500 request is a scar. Some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding. I learned that generosity without boundaries is an invitation to be consumed. That love requires not just an open hand, but a clear voice. I learned that the price of being the silent rock is that everyone forgets you can feel the weight. But I also learned that it's never too late to speak, to lay your evidence on the table, even if the courtroom is your own dining room, even if the verdict breaks your heart. The furnace hums steadily now. The house is warm. I still buy my jeans at Walmart. I still eat the same breakfast. The external trappings of a simple life remain, but inside, the landscape is forever changed. There is less softness, more stone, a clarity carved by loss. This is not a story of a villain and a victim. It is a story of a system, a family system that failed under the weight of its own unspoken rules. I was its architect. Michael was its beneficiary. Sarah was its opportunist. We all played our parts. The reckoning is over. The rebuilding is slow, and it looks nothing like what came before, but it is honest. And sometimes, at this age, with the sun coming through the kitchen window and the memory of Alina's laugh in the quiet house, honest is the only thing left that feels like enough. So what is the price of a father? Perhaps it is not a number at all, but a question we are afraid to ask until it is too late. This story is not unique. Studies suggest over a quarter of American families experience estrangement, and financial conflict is one of its most common roots. We build intricate, silent economies within our families, currencies of time, sacrifice, and money that we spend without ever agreeing on an exchange rate. We call it love or duty or generosity, but without clear language, without occasional statements of account, those economies can collapse. The giver feels depleted and invisible. The receiver feels entitled and then shocked when the rules they never knew suddenly appear. The tragedy is not in the giving, it is in the silence that surrounds it. The invisible sacrifice, as psychologists note, becomes impossible to value. What isn't seen is hard to honor. And so, over decades, a mountain of support can vanish from a child's awareness, leaving only a flat, empty plain where they believe they built everything themselves. The parent is left standing on the actual mountain, alone, wondering why no one sees the view. My story is a cautionary tale, but not in the way you might think. The lesson is not don't give to your children. It is this: make the cost visible, have the hard conversation early, let generosity be seen for what it is, a choice that has weight, a gift that comes from a specific place of abundance or sacrifice. A gift with invisible strings is not a gift, it is a trap for both sides. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are its architecture. They are what allow a bridge to be built between two people instead of one person becoming the foundation for the other to walk over. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Look at your own ledgers, the emotional ones, the financial ones, the ones filled with quiet hours and missed opportunities. Consider reading them aloud to the people who matter, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. This is what I have given. This is what it cost me. I do not regret it, but I need you to know it exists. That knowledge is the first, fragile step toward a balanced economy of care. The reckoning in my dining room did not fix my family, it broke it open. From that broken place, something new and more honest has a chance to grow. It is smaller, it is scarred, but it is real. And in the end, after all the numbers have been tallied and the graphs have been drawn, real is the only currency that never devalues. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you or made you think of your own family's silent ledgers, consider subscribing. We explore the true, complex cost of the things we never talk about. Until next time.